One of the Chargers' biggest weaknesses in 2024 was the interior of their offensive line, and it looked like they were going to run it back at left guard and center, but a new competitor has entered the mix, and it's a new and improved Jamaree Salyer.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcasts from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, last year after the Chargers lost to the Houston Texans in the playoff game, all the players had their exit interviews, some things that they needed to work on going into the offseason. And for Jamaree Salyer, it was getting in a little bit better shape, and he took that to heart and did just that, which has put him squarely in the mix to start at the left guard position for the Chargers. And also, we got some injury information on Rashawn Slater, what he's dealing with. Also, Tre Harris finally standing out, making some plays, had his best practice of training camp so far. And can 3 undrafted free agents make the 53-man roster? I think that's going to be a tough task this year.
It's definitely a tough task, but I do have 4 guys who could potentially make their case. But today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. David, when the Chargers decided to experiment with Zion Johnson at center, I think we were all a little bit optimistic, at least, that it could be something potentially different on the interior. But we're also very nervous to think that, okay, well, basically the Chargers' only chance for an upgrade at left guard or center was to play 2 guys, one in Zion who'd never played the position, and moving Bradley Bozeman back to a position he hasn't played in 5+ seasons was the only way that they were going to get an improvement there. But that doesn't look to be the case, at least after the practice that we saw on Monday. But if you want to get the full story on Jamaree Salyer's weight loss and everything, make sure to check out Daniel Popper's article. He talked to him in depth and got exactly what the backstory was. But we heard it from Greg Roman a couple of weeks ago, where he said that Jamaree Salyer had lost 35 pounds during the offseason. That's a big, big number, has leaned up. And the most interesting thing from that press conference was him saying this. He's a big physical guy that last year, quite frankly, was held back by just the shape he was in. Not that he wasn't a good player, but his actual physical conditioning was what was holding him back, is what Greg Roman said. And you just don't hear coaches say that very often, especially about a player in the playoffs, because he had such a rough game against the Texans. But David, he was, according to Daniel Popper, with the first team offense on Monday's practice, starting at left guard next to Bradley Bozeman, who was at center. And I do think it's like, okay, well, at least there is something that feels like maybe some potential actual competition for that left guard spot.
Which is great. I mean, this is fantastic because, hey, Jamaree Salyer's played a lot of football for the Chargers. Not so much last year. You know, after over 900 snaps the first 2 seasons, it went way down to only 300. And a lot of those snaps, he was basically brought in as an extra blocker, an extra offensive lineman, just to bring in another 330-plus pound guy to get on the field to try to move people out of the way. But
because someone was hurt, right? I mean,
yeah,
that was basically
or if somebody was hurt, right? He just came in, very sparingly after playing quite a lot of football for the Chargers in the first few years of his career. But the conditioning part of it, the bad weight, even he admitted to it himself that he was having a little bit of trouble later in games trying to be able to feel like he could finish out the full football game. So hopefully now that the good weight is there and that he has the endurance, that he'll be able to go out there and finish football games for the Chargers.
Yeah, Daniel Popper specifically said, from Jamaree Salyer, it's just a matter of being able to play at a high level for 4 quarters. So that does make a lot of sense as far as just, potentially him wearing down late in games, but also just as far as lateral movement, explosiveness off the line, all the things that could be a lot better with, better weight. And I believe he said he was down to 332 pounds, which means at one point last year, he's sitting around, 360 plus pounds as a guard. So much improved from that, standpoint. And obviously just great for him answering the challenge of, giving himself a chance, because he basically said in Popper's article, like, hey, that could be a career for me if I didn't get this under control. And now he knows it's about maintaining it. But this also meant that Zion Johnson was working with the second team, or as the second team center with the second team offense, which I don't think is, a benching. I saw, Stephen Hagelin was out at Chargers camp and gave a good breakdown of what he saw on the offensive line. And he was wondering, maybe if this was something that could be a benching for Zion Johnson. I don't think it's that. I think it's just him getting much needed snaps and them giving him all of the snaps they possibly can at every practice. And I mean, who could have thought that this was a good idea? Well, this was my tweet from July 24th. If they really want Zion to potentially start at center, shouldn't he be getting all of the snaps as the second string center on the days that Bradley Bozeman starts? That's what seems like happened today, David. Bradley Bozeman was the starter, and instead of seeing, those guys both out there with Zion at left guard and Bradley Bozeman at center, you give them both center reps in the same practice, which is something I've been clamoring for.
It absolutely just makes too much sense, right? I mean, you're trying to transition this guy to center. He needs as many opportunities as possible to play the center position, to snap, to be able to communicate, to be able to call the protections, to be able to be out there and just rep it out. That's what needs to happen. Now they have one padded practice under their belt with him as the center. So hopefully they have some valuable video to be able to make corrections and have him go out there and rep and fix those things on the football field. He should be the second string center for every single practice that he's not the first string center. That just makes too much sense, Daniel.
And I think the nice thing about this is just the fact that it felt like a long time where even if Zion lost the center battle, that he would automatically be the left guard and start there. And maybe that still is the case, but at least feels like right now they're kind of opening up different options. And I would say I honestly kind of just want to see, them decide if it's going to happen with Zion or not very soon, maybe even after the Hall of Fame game, and then make it a true battle at left guard between him and Jamaree Salyer. Make it a true battle at center with Andre James and Bradley Bozeman, because him getting snaps with the second team, Zion at center, that is, means Andre James is playing with the third team. That's the only downside of this. Yeah. But I don't really need to see Bradley Bozeman at center. Put Zion at center every day if you want to, or Zion and Andre James and have them alternate, right? And whatever else. You already know what some of these guys bring to the table. Let's see what else these other guys can do, because you have to upgrade those two spots whatever way you can and leave no stone unturned. But we also on Monday got a little bit of an update from Rashawn Slater, because it did seem like part of the reason he wasn't practicing was because of a hold-in situation, and who knows how much he would have pushed it or how much more he would have ramped up had he had that contract signed already. But we did find out there is an actual injury. It wasn't just a contract that was keeping Rashawn Slater off the field. He said that he had a blister that they had to carve out of his foot, and they said it left a pretty big hole in my foot. Yeah, that'll do it. That sounds pretty uncomfortable. I'd say the good news, David, is doesn't seem like it's anything that's going to be lasting. But yeah, pretty hard to play if they're, carving chunks out of your foot, I guess.
Yeah, no, as someone who has had multiple ingrown toenails, and I know it's not the same thing as a blister, but I understand that type of pain, that foot pain. It's that constant pressure, and whenever you have to stand all on your weight, right, and you're moving around, having to be athletic, it's excruciatingly painful to have any kind of pain in your feet. So you got to correct that, get that 100%. And hey, we're still way early on in the off season. There's no reason to push it. There's no reason to make this any worse than it has to be. If he needs to sit out a few days out of team drills to make sure he's 100% right, then that is 100%. Actually, it's 114% fine by me.
Yeah, and hopefully, I guess the only thing here would be they figure out some sort of footwear that helps him, and potentially stops blisters from happening. I did have a friend who told me today when he saw this news that he had a staph infection in his foot that they actually had to carve out of his foot almost down to the bone. Said they basically just filled it up with gauze and it took like a month to come back from. This doesn't seem as severe as that, but you're right. Foot pain is crazy. It sounds like an old made-up high school story. I played with a stress fracture in both of my feet at one point, and it felt like I was literally just running on fire, but I was way too afraid to tell my coaches that I couldn't play. So that's what kept me going. But good to know it doesn't seem like something lasting. Good to know that we should see Rashawn Slater out there soon, and also that it wasn't just a hold in, he really was kind of working through something when Greg Roman told us it was a day he was going to have a blow, or, Jim Harbaugh saying he has a minor injury. Some things can be trusted, I guess. But we still have more great stuff to get into, including Tre Harris having one of his best days, and also talking about how much of an impact KLS can have in this wide receiving core in 2025, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands, and that's exactly where Gametime comes in, because it's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. And I know this for a fact. I've done this with Gametime, and I think especially living in San Diego, if you have a free night off and you have a chance to last second go down to Petco Park, maybe the best ballpark in all of the country, and go take in a game with all the great food and stuff they have there, you do it. And knowing that the prices actually get better the closer it gets to first pitch makes it even better. But with the money you save on those tickets, you can now splurge on the food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group of people to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of the Locked On MLB and Locked On NFL, and it's easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. David, we have more to get into because it is a Tuesday, which means it's a buy or sell Tuesday, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions. But there is another practice note that I wanted to get to here, because Daniel Popper said that second round pick, Tre Harris, the wide receiver, had one of his better days at practice on Monday. And it felt like it necessarily wasn't the quantity of, how many plays he made, but I think more about how he made those plays at practice that really stood out. And you can kind of see, okay, hey, Chargers might have something here. This is definitely a big step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And so the two plays that got highlighted here, this is obviously from Daniel Popper of The Athletic. On the first catch, Harris ran an out route against cornerback Cam Hart. Herbert threw to Harris. Hart was in a good position, tried to undercut the route. Harris showed off his strong hands and contested catchability, ripping the ball away from Hart's breakup attempt. And that was one of the clips that the Chargers put out. And you have to go see it. I mean, dude, if you missed that one, it was fantastic. It just shows you the really strong hands, the ability to, tuck it and get it safe and get it away from the defender while, securing the catch.
I think
for
they
a touchdown.
posted the second catch that was in front of Troy Dye, right? I mean,
that's the second one? Okay.
Yeah, so you had the one that they posted on there where Justin Herbert makes a crazy tight window throw where basically Tre Harris is running into the coverage of Troy Dye, right?
Yeah.
If he throws it to him in stride, Troy Dye picks it off. But it was Justin Herbert not only making the throw, which is just insane, but putting the throw on his back shoulder. Tre Harris being able, on the back line of the end zone, to be able to turn around seamlessly, spin around, and get his feet in bounds was just a ridiculous catch that he made there in a tight window. And the other one was, where he beat Cam Hart and what seemed like really good coverage and kind of mossed him is what it sounds like.
And it just goes to show you Tre Harris's skill sets right there in those two plays, being able to beat man-to-man coverage, being able to go up and get the contested catch, be able to show strong hands. All of those elements we've seen in his college tape, and we're seeing it now on the football field with the Chargers on offense.
Yeah, and I think it's very specifically good because it's red zone drills, right? Obviously, you're counting touchdowns in red zone drills. It's always going to be a little inflated, right? Because you're starting so close to the end zone. But what was not inflated was the Chargers passing touchdowns in the red zone last year. Justin Herbert actually had more passing touchdowns outside of the red zone, more 20-plus yard touchdowns than he had touchdowns in the red zone last year. He only had 10 red zone touchdowns last year as opposed to 13 20-plus yard touchdowns last year. And that is something where it felt like once the field started shrinking a little bit, they didn't have the weapons that could go win those one-on-one matchups and could make those plays consistently enough. That play by Tre Harris, to have someone that can do that, not to be hyperbolic, I don't know if we've ever seen Quentin Johnston make that play. Like that specific play, turning around, full speed running, maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but to see that from Tre Harris so early on and Justin Herbert to have the trust to throw him that ball.
Yeah, really encouraging.
To put the ball in harm's way in the red zone and to just kind of fit it into a tight window, I think is super encouraging. But yeah, this is from Warren Sharp's football preview 2025. Or actually, this is actually just from a fantasy rankings that I saw where Justin Herbert had a 3.3 yards per attempt last year in the red zone, which isn't great. and he only completed 51% of his passes. So that is the area of the field where I think they hoped Mike Williams would be able to help.
Yeah.
And he's out now, obviously. So to see, Keandre Lambert-Smith making some big plays there, right? Tre Harris now making some big plays in the red zone. Hopefully an improved running game. Now that's a situation where maybe you're a much better red zone team in 2025. But KLS had some big plays at Monday's practice as well, and I think that's what caused Beyond Eon's voicemail here.
I'm Locked On Chargers. Daniel and David, Beyond Eon's back again with another buy or sell. Man, I don't know if you guys are seeing this kid, KLS, out here making play after play. Big play Dre. My buy or sell is this. Big play Dre, Keandre Lambert-Smith, KLS will end the season as wide receiver number 3 on the Los Angeles Chargers. And a bonus, what are the chances of him ending the season as wide receiver number 2? Thanks, guys.
This is a good buy or sell, David, and I think it's mostly in part because obviously KOS has had a pretty impressive camp so far and has some real highlights already on his highlight reel. But also, man, like to a certain extent, like wide receiver 3 feels very attainable. And I think a lot of it's because you basically have 3 wide receivers right now in Quentin Johnston and Tre Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith, where QJ definitely has the leg up on these guys. But it legitimately feels like any one of those guys could be wide receiver 3 or even wide receiver 2 by the end of the season where we sit right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we have to look at this and say how many opportunities is he going to be able to get to be able to move up the depth chart too, because the Chargers, the way they like to play, they tend to have a few more tight ends on the football field and have a few less wide receivers on the football field. So there's only going to be a couple of guys out there that's going to be on offense on a consistent basis, to be able to be one of those core guys. And I think for KLS, it's going to have to be the consistency. The spectacular catches are awesome, and you definitely need them, and they're going to be part of your offense for sure. But, you have to be able to be trusted to make the regular catches on the regular routes, to be able to go out there and make those on a consistent basis. Once you do that, then you can move up the depth chart and get your opportunities to continue. Now, for me, I'm going to sell that he's going to finish as wide receiver 3. I just think it's going to be Tre Harris, in my opinion. I think that, he is a more well-rounded skill set, and that's going to eventually shine through, and he's going to take the bulk of those opportunities.
So you're saying QJ is wide receiver 2, Tre Harris wide receiver 3 then, right? Just to make sure. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, sir.
So per Eric Smith, Keandre Lambert-Smith won all 3 of his reps during the one-on-ones at Monday's practice. The 5th round pick, according to Smith, hauled in a comeback route against Jasir Taylor and later a contested catch against Nico Reed. And there was one that the Chargers did put out, and it was him beating Cam Hart on a deep ball with an absolute dime from Justin Herbert. But I think you saw that kind of late, second, third gear that kicked in there at the deep part of the field where he was able to separate and make the catch on Cam Hart, who really wasn't in bad coverage. So I'd say right now the flashes aren't enough to totally sell me on that. I could totally see any one of these guys, but if I had to put a significant amount of money on it right now, Quentin Johnson still had a ridiculously good camp so far. And I think that Tre Harris will still, by the end of, training camp in the preseason, probably have a good grip on that wide receiver 3 role. Now, I think 4 guys will play, right? And he obviously brings a little bit of a different skill set to the table as far as his speed goes. But I do think that he's going to have something to say about it. We'll see how much of a firm grasp QJ can keep him on that wide receiver 2 spot and see if he, ends up slipping down there if he starts to struggle. But let's get to this one here from RBH3 on Instagram, who says, Omarion Hampton doesn't give back the RB1 job and competes for Rookie of the Year buy or sell. So let's focus on the first part of it here. Maybe he could get in on the Rookie of the Year conversation. We'll have those talks again at some point. But David, I'm 100% buying at this point. I don't think Hampton is giving the RB1 spot back because I don't know when Najee Harris is going to be back.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows. He's still, at least
no
he's showing up on the football field now, and he's being a part of practice, albeit with heavy, very heavy, thick, sunglasses on, protecting his eyes. So until that changes, until we can kind of see the progression there, I don't think you can feel comfortable with understanding when he's going to be back or if he's going to be back. There's just so much uncertainty there. And with Omarion Hampton, at this point, he's been the RB1 and he's going to continue to be the RB1 because it kind of has to be that way. He has to practice and he has to play, and the Chargers have to assume that he is going to be the number 1 guy going into the season because of the uncertainty with Najee Harris.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the uncertainty definitely kind of makes you question what the floor of this running back room is, just because Omarion Hampton is a rookie and you
Yeah.
don't completely know what you're going to get. But I would say, as far as just physical ability, polishing the passing game, looking the part, Omarion Hampton does all those things. I think the kind of interesting thing to me, which I've talked to you about a little bit, is just like, it's surprising we haven't had a huge Omarion Hampton day yet. Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's hard because I do think that for him, you're not really going to be able to see what makes him special until guys have to try to tackle him down to the ground,
For
which
real.
is why
Yeah.
he will be maybe the number one guy we are looking forward to when we get into the players we're most excited to see in the Chargers' first preseason game. Only a couple of days away on Thursday night, but we still have more great buy or sells to get into, including if 3 undrafted free agents could somehow make the opening 53-man roster. I have 4 candidates for it. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This episode is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all of the overreactions that we live for, especially on a buy or sell Tuesday. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and David and the Locked On Chargers podcast are playing on a Yahoo Fantasy league, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. And for me, I'm the type of fantasy football player that rolls out of bed at about 9:55 a.m. on Sunday Pacific time and has to very frantically set all of my lineups and make a lot of additions to my team at the very last second. And that's where Yahoo, I think, clears everything. It's why me and my friends switched over to it a few years back. But also, to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. And it all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. David, we still have more great buy or sells to get into here, but it starts with undrafted free agents. And if you know the Chargers and you've followed them as long as we have, they have a long history of guys, including one that's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame that we'll be celebrating this week in Antonio Gates. But that has always been one of the funnest things about covering the Chargers, is you know that undrafted free agents have a legitimate shot and that they are always pretty much not depending at all on who the coach is to find guys and take chances on them, even if they're undrafted free agents, even if no one thinks they have a chance or, they might get overlooked by other teams. But thank you, as always, for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks right now and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. So, David, let's get to this buy or sell here, and it's a good one because it's a big number to put this buy or sell at, in my opinion, but it's from We Are the Storm, and it's 3 undrafted free agents make the final 53-man roster, buy or sell. He did put after the Hall of Fame game, which obviously we don't know after the Hall of Fame game because we haven't seen it yet. But 3 in total making the final 53, David. Can you buy or sell that?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be an incredibly difficult roster to be able to make this year. And I think 3 is a massive number. I think the guys, to me, that have the best chance, at least up to this point so far with all the information that we've been provided. Nico Reed, the cornerback, seems like he's been an ascending player, a guy that's been making the most of his opportunities. Rocket Sanders, I know he dealt with some injuries, but he also made his way back into practice on Monday, which is great news for him. And also Steve Klotz, the tight end, extra blocker, whatever you want to call him. I think those 3 guys have the best chance to be able to make this roster, but I just think that this is a roster that I don't believe is going to accompany or accommodate 3 undrafted free agents, so I'm going to sell it.
Yeah, it's too early, right, to say this. We have to see, and that's why, I think you brought up the Hall of Fame game there, because you have to see it. But I would add one more guy into the list, and it's a guy we haven't talked about enough, but I've been trying to keep up with everything Daniel Popper's been talking about from Chargers training camp, and there's a guy that he continually brings up as far as someone who has made a big name for themselves so far, and it's Dale Von Campbell, who is the wide receiver from South Carolina, big, I think 6'4", 200-plus pounds, and making some big-time plays, including on Monday's practice. He, according to Popper, on a 4th and 9, went up and got a ball over Dante Jackson in the first team defense for a touchdown. Popper has also said that he's gotten some wide receiver, first team wide receiver snaps. And I mean, partially probably due to, Ladd McConkey getting a day off on Monday. Jalen Reagor's been banged up. We've also, have 2 rookies that have kind of started from the bottom and had to make their way up. But this is an undrafted rookie, right? So great for him. Nico Reed, another great call there. I mean, according to Popper, has a pass breakup in 4 straight practices and 2 interceptions, both off of Justin Herbert, which led Jesse Minter to give the quote of the day saying, make a play a day, and then people will start to know who you are, especially if you're undrafted. So him, Dale Von Campbell, Nico Reed, those are the top 2 guys right now, but I think a lot of that's because we haven't gotten to see Steve O'Klotz or Rocket Sanders in the preseason, which we always knew if they were going to make their mark, that was going to be it. But you're right. I mean, trying to make a 53-man is going to be really tough for any undrafted free agent. It could be another loaded practice squad again like we saw last year, or opportunity squad. But let's get to this next buy or sell here from Hayden Jong Young on Instagram, who says, buy or sell, the Chargers will finish above 500 against 2024 playoff teams this year. So teams that made the playoffs last year, David, last year they went 2-5 against those teams, and the only team they beat was the Broncos twice. Can they finish above 500 against those same teams this season?
Yes, they can. I'm going to buy it. I think that they are going to do a lot better against those teams, just because last year I wasn't really expecting them to be as competitive because it's the first year of a new organization, a new regime. But now that you have another year under your belt and you have a better running game and you have better depth across the roster, I expect them to be a lot more successful against those football teams. And the fact of the matter is, if you want to get where you want to go and you want to be, a difference maker in the playoffs, then you have to be able to beat these teams in the regular season. So, yes, I have them, going above 500 against those teams. I'm going to put it at 6-3. That's where I kind of, need it to be or expect it to be. But yes, that's where I have it.
Oh yeah, I mean they have to if they want to be serious about winning playoff games in 2025. And I went through the games, and I mean it's going to be tough, man. I mean you have 4 games obviously against the Broncos and the Chiefs. You also have the Eagles, the Commanders, the Steelers, the Texans, and the Vikings. So you have both Super Bowl teams that you're going up against, 3 games against the Super Bowl teams, which is crazy. And then you have 4 games against 3 of the final 4 playoff teams from last year. So it's going to be really tough. I am also going to buy it. I'm going to say they go 5-4. I have them splitting with the Broncos and the Chiefs and beating the Steelers, the Texans, and the Vikings to get to that 5-4 mark if I was doing it right now. I think in my first prediction, I had them losing to the Vikings. I think they can beat the Vikings, with a rookie quarterback on a short week on Thursday Night Football, wearing some sweet alternate uniforms, right? And that'll be really fun. But let's get to one more here. We haven't talked much about the Chargers defense today, but Athir thinks one group is being severely underrated.
Daniel, David, this is your boy Athir. Bias Tuesday an overreaction. The Chargers secondary is being overlooked this coming season because of the schedule that we are facing. I'm buying it. What do you say? Be aware what Jesse Minter is going to cook. Thank you. Love to hear you. Bye.
Man, I think Jesse Minter, Steve Klingscale for that matter, too, are the only reason we're probably not way more concerned about the Chargers secondary, especially their cornerbacks. David, do you think people are underrating the Chargers secondary going into the year potentially?
Yeah, I think they are, and I think for good reason. The list of quarterbacks and wide receivers that they're going to be going up against is a murderer's row. Some of the top guys in the league. So I think there's some trepidation there. But yeah, I also think that there's some people that are underselling the fact that this is the second year for most of these guys in this defensive system. I think there's one guy that's probably going to be factoring heavily that's new. That's Dante Jackson, in my opinion. He's going to be a part of that cornerback rotation, but this is year 2 for Derwin James, and they know exactly how to use him. It's year 2 for Elijah Molden, and they know exactly what he's going to do and what he brings to the table and what that allows Derwin James to do. And it's year 2 for Tarheeb and for Cam Hart, 2 fifth-round rookie corners from last year that way outperformed and outplayed what anybody was expecting from them. So yes, I think they're underselling it a little bit, but it's because they're not paying attention. Now, when you get these guys in another year in this system to go out there and ball out, I think they're going to play fast and play physical from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because, like, I don't think people, like, it just feels like no one really cares about the Chargers secondary, right? I would say that you shouldn't underrate their safeties, and that's for sure. I mean, I think they could have the best safety duo in the league this year. Obviously, with Elijah Molden coming back and Derwin James, even if he's, playing mostly in the slot, they have potential to do that. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, DK Metcalf. And that's not even all the guys who are wide receiver one type of players or have been before. But this is the great stat I actually got from Warren Sharp's football preview. And it's the 6 games the Chargers didn't go up against somebody's backup, somebody who eventually got benched, or a rookie quarterback last year. They were 1-5 in those games. And the success rate for those quarterbacks was 46%, averaging 7.4 yards per attempt, a 12-3 touchdown to interception ratio, and a passer rating over 100. And the games where they went up against all those other bad quarterbacks and the Bo Nixes and other rookies they went up against, it was 12 touchdowns versus 12 interceptions, which is great for a secondary, and also a passer rating of 80. So the Chargers beat up on bad teams last year. If you took just their games against the good quarterbacks, they would have ranked 31st out of 32 teams in EPA and 30th in success rate. So last year was a little bit of a mirage for that defense, and we knew it even when it was happening, and the red flags were a little bit there. Now you're hoping some of those guys' second years, maybe a better fit in Dante Jackson than where he was last year, can do more. But I do think this is a unit that will come down to earth a little bit. I don't think we'll see them quite overachieve the way that they did last year. And that's even, with me believing that Steve Klingscale and Jesse Minter can get much more out of Dante Jackson, who could be a starter at this point on the outside. Between him or Cam Hart, both guys have been rotating in with the first team defense. So I have full trust in Jesse Minter in this defense, but the Chargers are going to need that group to really overachieved again, specifically those cornerbacks, if they're going to, try to repeat as a top 10 defense in the NFL in 2025. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is, as you know, tomorrow we'll be back with the latest practice report and all of the latest Chargers news. Is the only daily Chargers podcast out there. To make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media or getting your buy or sells in to us at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you guys want to get your voice on the show like a Thier, call into 323-524-7924 and get a 30-second Chargers question or buy or sell in there. That always is going to give you the best chance. We love having that AM radio feel, harkens back to my youth, and getting your guys' actual voices on the show. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Be back tomorrow for the recap of Tuesday's practice. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.